All right, let's get down to some brass tacks here, right? PTSD. What is PTSD? I don't know the book definition of it verbatim, but in a nutshell, PTSD develops when you find yourself in a situation where you fear for your own life and well-being or that of somebody near to you or close to you. So you can simply witness an event or you can be involved in an event. Depends on what your makeup is, I guess. I'm not 100%, but anyhow, that is what PTSD is in a nutshell. TBI is a concussion. TBI is your gray matter slapping around in your head and getting a little dented and bruised, making it so things don't want to function quite right. There's this thing called polytrauma that I've come to discover when it comes to the VA system as I get stuck in it nonstop. I have physical issues and the behavioral health ones through PTSD and TBI. The problem is that symptoms mask themselves apparently. So when they're trying to initially figure out what's going on with somebody, they have to go through all these different steps and take all these things into account as to, well, is it PTSD or is it TBI or is it both? Is one masking the other? It can get confusing, but anyhow, that's a summation of PTSD and what it's about. Let's talk about how it affects you or how it goes about. When you're in combat, it's fairly simple the way I look at it. You need to survive, right? All of us have those, feral pathways, whatever you may want to call them, that go throughout our brain. They've been there since the day of the Cro-Magnon man, or whatever the case is. It's just who we are and what we're about. All people are totally different, but at the exact same time, you're pretty much totally the same. Bit of a conundrum, I guess, if you think about it. But anyhow, that's my point. So PTSD. You're downrange, you're out in sector, or whatever the case may be, and an event happens. You fear for your life, you fear for somebody else's life, whatever the case is, it's made a profound impact on you, and your brain decides that it doesn't want to work any longer. You run down on basic life support systems, I guess you could say. You're running on fear. You're running on adrenaline. All right, PTSD and how it affects you. People talk about flipping switches, right? I don't know, this switch flipped and I'm not sure when it happened, how it happened, why it happened, and I'm not sure how to flip it back on. Well, let's go into a little bit of an analogy with this, okay? In my experiences, the way my dealing with this issue has come about as far as I can tell. Think of a high-rise building. In that high-rise building, we're talking 50, 60 floors, whatever, there's hundreds and hundreds of apartments, right? Each one of those apartments is fed by electrical circuits. There's a main line that comes into that apartment, and then there's multiple branches that split off from there to run outlets, to run lights, whatever it may take that takes utilities to operate. So if you trace that back down and you wanted to shut that system down, in that apartment, there's probably a singular fuse panel with breakers in it, and you go in and you turn off the breakers and you go about your business. When you're done, you turn them back on, the problem's solved. But majority of us don't function that way when we use this analogy. What we do is we go all the way to the basement, all the way down, deep, dark, dank, and nasty, right? We find the main hub, main fuse panel, the trunk line, right? And you open that sucker up, and there's tons and tons of breakers in there. So if there's an issue in, say, one of those apartments, you can go ahead and you can identify that apartment, and you can flip the breaker to that apartment. It's shut down, no problem. Go in, fix it again, come back. It's pretty simple to turn it back on, right? You just flip that breaker. A lot of people don't do that way. A lot of people will open that panel, and they might look over those little, the individual breakers for each individual section, but they don't use that. They look down to the right, or wherever the case is, and they find that big honking main breaker for the whole panel, for the whole building, right? And they go ahead and flip that sucker off. There we go. That cures that. Now what happens? Well, now the emergency lighting comes on, right? Lights are flickering a little bit. Hallways are kind of dark. The clarity is kind of gone when you're moving about, if you will, when you're on these emergency services. Everything's running on generators. Generators are going to keep things up, and it's going to keep them functional for a while you're trying to repair whatever it is that you're doing when the power's out to the entire structure. However, those require fuel, and eventually they're not going to be able to carry the constant load because it's only an emergency system, folks, right? It's only meant to momentarily buffer whatever the issue is. So after a while, it's going to crash and burn itself, and the lights are going to flicker out altogether, emergency or not, and now you've caused more damage than anything else. In my case, and folks like me, I went to the basement and I found the utility room. And I saw the little breakers, and I saw the main breaker. But you know what I saw next to that whole fuse panel? I saw the fire axe. You know what I did with that fire axe? I took it and I chopped the hell out of the main trunk line. The main feed that feeds everything going on in that high-rise structure. All those hundreds of apartments, all those circuits and networks, right? Gone. Toast. Not coming back online anytime soon. Handled it. It was done. It was sabotaged. It's over with, right? Okay. Well, now we royally messed things up, haven't we? How are we going to fix all this? Well, now you got to take each individual line and splice it back together for each of these hundreds of apartments, with each of these hundreds and thousands of circuits, one by one piece at a time, baby steps, working through it. You know, you might be trying to speed it up and push through it and work as fast as you can. Even if you're working at a fever pitch pace, it's going to take a long damn time. And you know what else is going to happen? In that process, with so much going on and so much to fix, you're going to cross some wires here and there. You know, 1A is going to go to turn on the lights in the blender, and 2B is going to come on. Until somebody notifies you that that issue is there and that connection's not right, it's never going to get fixed properly, right? So that's the analogy that I like. Here's another one for you that we'll break down when we're talking about PTSD. We'll call it the wheels in the bus go clunk, 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 okay? I heard somebody talking, kind of making an analogy about it once, and I kind of liked it, so I'm going to put my own spin on it. When you're operating a vehicle, you own your vehicle. It's your daily driver. You take that sucker everywhere. You take it on road trips, whatever the case is. It's old faithful, old reliable, had it forever, love it, don't want to get rid of it, whatever the case is. So you drive it non-stop. While driving it, you know, your brakes, they wear down. You know, it's an expendable item. It's going to lose its way, its path after a while, and need to be replaced. So there's an issue, an underlying issue starting and going on. You know, the wearing down of those brake pads. They're getting thinner and thinner all the time. When they get to the point where they about need to be replaced, you know, you might feel some sticking, some shuddering, some shimmering, shimmying, whatever the case is in your front end or every time you apply the brakes, right? Okay. You love this vehicle. It's your, you know, old standby. You know, it's paid for itself over and over again, whatever the case is. And you don't want to get rid of it. You want to repair it. But at the same time, you're familiar with it because you've had it for so long. And you enjoy driving this thing so much. So, yeah, the brakes are getting a bit soft or squishy or sticking or whatever the case is, but it's still functional. You can still drive this vehicle, correct? The brakes are an important part of the entire system. Just like a human body, you know, the human body is an entire system. And it takes many things to make it run. However, it's impressive in its capability to let certain elements of that system lag or fall behind or not function altogether, but the main system still keeps going, kind of like those auxiliary lights in the hallways when the power goes out in that high rise, right? So you got a brake issue, you're aware of it, but you don't think it's a big deal. So I've got time, I'll take a peek at it at some point. So you keep driving that car. As you're driving that car, the issue gets worse and worse. Your brake pads are wearing down. Now your rotors are starting to warp. Now maybe your tie rod ends are starting to get a little bit loose or worn out, and bearings and bushings, whatever the case. But that one initial issue drags down the whole system. It's not getting the attention that it needs because you, as the person that was there at onset, you don't recognize the necessary severity of it. You know, yeah, there's an issue of some sort, but it can wait for the time being. So you wait. So like I said, you've warped your rotors, you're probably kicking out brake pads by now, and eventually the entire system's going to fail just from the wear and tear and the neglect because you, as the individual, chose not to address said issue of the brakes in the beginning. Or you didn't know to. You know, not all people are mechanically inclined, so lots of people don't understand there's issues going on. After a while, you're going to have catastrophic failure. Brakes are going to fail when you're humming down the road, and you know you're going to have a life-altering event, more than likely. So that's my analogy on that. Let's talk about dangerous veterans with PTSD and unpredictability and how they're going to snap. Maybe in some instances, few and far between, but most of us have enough discipline to understand who we are, what we're about, and to deal with our issues without taking that level of involvement. And we're not going to go take a shotgun and run through a playground and start blasting children, or just take to the street and start killing people for no good reason. Are we dangerous? Damn Skippy, we're dangerous, and you better be thankful for that. We're the ones that you sent to war. We're the ones that you sent over there to get shot at, to get blown up, to protect your way of life so you can sit on your couch oblivious to what's going on around you, you know, and eat your ho-hos and whine about the fact that your AC's not working or whatever the case is. And I understand not everybody's like that, but there is an overall presence of lack of knowledge when it comes to the issues here, folks, and that's part of what I'm hoping to correct by putting this all out there. You know, are we dangerous? Yes. Yes, we are. Are we looking to come out and go willy-nilly and start, you know, hurting people, killing people, whatever the case is? No, that's not the case at all. You know, we all took oaths, we all swore to do the right thing, and for the most part, we do what we can there, and we behave ourselves. We seek the proper treatments, and go from there, you know. Let's talk about treatments while we're at it. This whole cookie-cutter approach to treatment of these issues it's asinine, folks. It doesn't work. Like I said earlier in a clip, you know, everybody's exactly the same, and at the same time, we're totally different. What works for one guy may not work for the other, especially when the answer is shoving pills down your throat. There was a point in my life where I was on 22 different medications between my body and my head. They thought it was a great idea to do that. Eventually one day, I believe it was clozapam and tramadol, hit my liver, because your liver's like a big filter for your body, and got bound up at the same time. And by doing so, gave me what's called serotonin syndrome, which is lethal if it's not taken care of. You know, I was walking around all happy and twitchy, and if it hadn't been for a few people who recognized that there was something not quite right with me, I'd be dead, potentially, and that's not a good thing. I kind of enjoy breathing, you know. All this psychotherapy stuff, you know, this eye movement and visualization, meditation, immersion therapies, you know, they work great for some people, but for somebody like me, they don't do anything. I went and spent 90 days in law school up at Lermsey in Army's pilot program for PTSD treatment, and it's called the Evolution Program. It was fairly well put together. Lots and lots of different types of treatments and therapies. Myself personally, all I took out of it was I enjoyed the art therapy and maybe some of the talk sessions with some of the other guys. Other than that, it didn't do a lot for me, you know. So I was inpatient for 90 days. At the end of it, I came out with 25 to 30% reduction in my symptoms. It didn't last, didn't hold, you know. And then I was put back into the WTU, the Warrior Transition Unit, down in K-Town, down in Kaiserslautern, and processed for separation.